really pushing back here to say, no, we want all fossil fuels, not just coal, but gas and oil included in this phase out. So that's part of what the discussion is. In terms of the gender action plan, the gap, it has been excruciating. I mean, there have been meetings after meetings the last 2 weeks, and there were new negotiators being brought on. And so it was like going back to square one and needing to explain to them why there needs to be gender responsive climate policy. Very frustrating negotiations. And basically, you know, the COP's not over. It's probably going to run into Saturday. And what we know so far is that in terms of the gender action plan, it's going to be moved to the intersessional in Bonn. So it's been very frustrating on really bringing attention to the gap and getting governments to pay attention to gender at this COP. There have been enormous amounts of actions here. A lot of activists speaking out and NGOs speaking out about human rights. And of course, there's been huge frustration here around political prisoners who are speaking out that are environmentalists, people speaking out on human rights, huge solidarity for human rights activists and those speaking out to get their governments to respond to the climate crisis, and a lot of actions around that. We've had a lot of actions in the last few days around fossil fuel phase out, demanding that we keep fossil fuels in the ground, that we stop deforestation. So yeah, I would also like to mention that Global Witness came out with a report a few days ago that there's 25% more fossil fuel delegates here than even in Glasgow. So it's still one of the largest delegations here is a fossil fuel industry. So there's been a lot of protests around getting polluters out. There's just way too much corporates here. So the other thing I wanted to bring forward that is sort of on the positive note of a very difficult time here is that in terms of loss and damage, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's negotiations going on now, but we do know that human rights is in the loss and damage text, and it's a tiny loophole that we can use on human rights. As you know, the Women's Earth and Climate Caucus, we are a Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. We are on the steering committee of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And there have been some really good moves on that, I will say. Since Tuvalu called for the treaty on the floor of COP27, this follows Vanuatu calling for a treaty that happened at Climate Week in New York. The interest from parties has really escalated, which is really good. There's been multiple high-level bilateral and multilateral meetings at the COP with at least 25 countries. So the discussion on the treaty, the fossil fuel treaty, has really expanded. And there have been 600 parliamentarians in 7 countries engaged. The World Health Organization, 3,000 scientists, and so much more. So there's still a lot of work to do on the treaty. We're setting up more meetings. I think that's a really good momentum because it means we're really looking at a treaty that will keep fossil fuels in the ground, which is what the IPCC is telling us. The International Energy Agency has said no more fossil fuel expansion, and we need countries to stop doing that. And I'm just going to bring on one more point and then hand it over to our speakers. We need to keep in context that 60 of the largest banks in the world have put $4.6 trillion into fossil fuel financings since the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement. And a report by the UN Environment Program found that governments still plan to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than would be consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. So these are disastrous numbers. So we've got to really keep pushing governments while we're here. The other thing I wanted to alert our community to is that the G20 has been meeting during the second week of the COP. So WECAN has put out this report on the gender integration in climate policy, a G20 analysis. I'm going to hold that up. This is on our website. And we did a very in-depth analysis showing how the G20 countries, which are the wealthiest countries and the biggest polluters, are not doing enough on gender. And we know that it is critical to have women's leadership at this point. We saw through the Women's Political Empowerment Index that just a one degree increase in the Women's Political Power Index leads to an 11.51% decrease in carbon emissions. And I could go on and on with statistics about why you have to have women leadership roles. And yet here at the COP, a recent study showed that 74% of the speaking time at the COP is done by men, 74%. And yet women's leadership is critical to resolving the climate crisis. So this is a report we put out this week. I also wanted to point out that we have recommendations for governments as well as the financiers of fossil fuels, as well as deforestation, in responding to the climate emergency report that we've put out. We released it during Climate Week, and we've continued the release here at the COP that has very big recommendations for banks, for governments, on what they can do to keep us at 1.5 degrees and how they can start supporting much more community-led solutions and stop false solutions to the climate crisis, stop carbon offsets, and really, we know we need to stop extraction at the source. And this report gives you lots of recommendations that the financial sector can look at, that governments can look at, that really centers climate justice, Indigenous rights, the leadership of Black, Indigenous, and Brown women, which needs to be centered, which is often excluded. And we need to have a completely different analysis that is decolonized, that respects economic justice, racial justice, gender justice. And that's what we're really advocating for here, to really put forward a climate justice narrative, because the narrative that is happening at the COP is not working. We need a completely different political context. And that's what we're doing here in the with all of the people's movements. Today, there was also a huge plenary with all of the constituencies coming together. And we did a big action here through the plenaries, which you can see a live stream on our WECAN Facebook live stream. And there was a sit-in in which all the constituencies put forward a declaration, and we'll put that declaration and post the full documentation on it, which calls for human rights, climate justice, and a demand that we keep the 1.5 degree goal alive. So that's a little bit synopsis for me, and we're doing the best we can in a really messy situation here. And I'm going to hand the floor over now to Jackie Patterson, who's the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project. And she's put forward some very powerful work here at the COP. Jackie, you have the floor. Thanks so much for taking time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for those powerful and inspiring and also sobering opening remarks. So yeah, it's been quite a 2 weeks. And as you say, this, as everyone is saying, this is a different type of COP in so many different ways. With the Chisholm Legacy Project, we are a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership. And we have been here this week. The very first day that we were at COP, we relaunched the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative alongside the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance and 41 different nations that are represented in the Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative. We first launched it in 2015. We haven't had that much in the way of capacity to keep it going, but now with the Chisholm Legacy Project, we have had dedicated capacity to move it forward. So we're proud to step forward and so in service of these 41 nations and counting who are coming under this common banner of advancing racial justice. Yesterday, we had a panel on the feminist implications of a resolution that we have put forward as the Global Afro-Descendant Climate Justice Collaborative. And the resolution is on race, racism, and climate reparations in the UNFCCC. That resolution, which can be found on our website or the website of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and our website is www.thechisholmlegacyproject.org. CHISHOLM, legacyproject.org. And so that resolution talks about how race and racism renders Afro-descendant populations across the globe systematically more at risk for the impacts of climate change. We talk about how the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's sixth assessment report listed colonialism not only as a driver of the climate crisis, but also as an ongoing dynamic that exacerbates communities' risk of climate change impacts. We talked about how the World Conference of Racism called for investments in safe and healthy environments, citing the disproportionate exposure to unhealthy environments due to racism against Afro-descendant persons, and so on and so on. We talked about how the 10 most vulnerable nations in the world, according to the Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative and German Watch's Climate Risk Index, that 7 out of the 10 most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change are Afro-descendant nations: Haiti, Chad, Malawi, Niger, Kenya, Somalia, and Sudan. And so, and then we also talked about how even within industrialized nations and the global north, where the impacts of climate change aren't as felt as in the global south, but they are still felt, and they're disproportionately felt by Afro-descendant folks in those nations. And so this resolution can be found again on either of those websites to hear more about it. But yesterday we had a panel on the feminist analysis and implications of that resolution. We heard from Yershel Rodriguez, who spoke about becoming homeless after Hurricane Ida, and she just talked about her as an Afro-Colombian and in Colombia, her experience with racism there in her nation of birth. We heard from Melania Chiponda from Zimbabwe, who spoke about racism and colonialism in Zimbabwe, and she talked about the wars that happened, and really knowing from birth that she was considered less than by these colonialist white supremacist powers there. She talked about how it was systematized throughout Zimbabwe. Amira Woods from Liberia spoke about how Liberia and Ethiopia were the only 2 countries in Africa that were not colonized, but that she went on to describe how they were effectively colonized by corporatization, by Firestone tires, through the pollution to generate those tires, and through the kind of systems of almost apartheid in terms of the rich folks who were gaining from those from the wealth that was generated by Firestone tires, while others were living in relative squalor. We heard from Adrienne Hollis from Mobile, Alabama in the United States, who spoke about going swimming in her new white bathing suit and emerging from the water with black and brown bathing suit by the oil that she was swimming in, because of where her community was. Black communities were pushed into certain areas that were the ones that were most often being polluted. And everyone spoke about the gendered intersections that they experience is with misogyny really combining with racism to provide double jeopardy for their existence. So today we released the resolution after talking about it at the beginning. We launched it for signatories, and today we released a resolution with over 300 signatories and counting from around the globe. In it, we were calling out the very issues that I talked about at the beginning in terms of how colonialism, racism are directly intertwined with the foundations of climate change. But we also are calling for an acknowledgement of intersectionality, the intersectionality of gendered inequities, the intersectionality of racialized inequities, as well as other intersections as well around indigeneity and so forth. We're calling for a focal point on racial justice within the UNFCCC process. We're calling for a constituency group on racial justice to be established within the UNFCCC. We're calling for recognition in the text and negotiations that to center race, racism, and colonialism in the UNFCCC is to get at the root of how we've reached where we are in the climate crisis. To center colonialism is to acknowledge that only by addressing the root cause of climate change can we move forward. As Osprey said, we can't have false solutions being driven by the corporate interests that continue to dominate the UNFCCC. We must have real solutions that are driven by the frontline communities, the frontline women who are fighting. There is no climate justice without racial justice. There is no climate justice without gender justice. And climate justice cannot exist in a global extractive capitalist economy. So to end on a positive note, from the informal to formal sessions, we heard the message time and time again. We heard the stories time and time again, that the only way out of the climate crisis is to follow the leadership of Indigenous women, Black women, Asian and Pacific Islander women, Latina, and so forth. Rooted in our traditions and in the feminist wisdom and power, we are already lighting the way to being in harmony with the regenerative laws of nature, and including embracing, honoring, and respecting and protecting biodiversity. We're growing our own food, generating our own energy, ensuring that all enjoy the right to water, all of this and more, while respecting the earth and her inhabitants. So the models are there, the leadership is there. We just have to follow the leader instead of following corporate interests and false solutions. So thank you. I'll hand it back to Osprey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for those powerful remarks and the incredible work that you're doing here, and for joining us. And really powerful to have your advocacy, and seeing the initiatives that you've put forward here are so critical. And I just want to thank you so much for taking time. And also, I got to see you for a few seconds here and there. And, you know, we still are here, and we are still pushing out the work you're doing. I know that you had a press conference yesterday or today. I'm not sure what it was actually, but I will get that, and we will make sure to have that press conference pushed out in our network. So thank you for that. I know we have Noelene Nabulivou, who is with us, and also Leila Salazar Lopez. So we're going to first hear from Noelene and then go to Leila and also Patricia Gualinga. So I just wanted you to know. I also, for those of you who are just joining us, we're literally doing sort of a guerrilla media thing. We barely have internet. We're kind of stuck in a corner here at the back end of the COP. There's things going on all around us. So I just wanted to let people who are tuning in know, you know, we're doing the very best we can in a very unusual situation that we hadn't planned. The internet here in Egypt is extremely difficult, and many different things are going on. So with that, I want to hand the floor to you, Noelene, who is the co-founder and the director of DIVA for Equality from Fiji. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Osprey and everyone else. And in the kind of spirit of this, I have a 4.5-year-old in my arms, and it's 5 a.m. here in the morning in Fiji. So if she starts to move or make some noise, then I'll probably go off. But thank you for the opportunity to just kind of start actually and say, so while I'm working from here in Fiji this time, we have colleagues who are working there in Egypt, and we're coordinating. And that's one of the first things maybe to talk about, is that women are always creative, and we're always finding ways, you know, no matter where we are and no matter our circumstances. The unpaid care, domestic and communal work that we do is really part of our climate justice work. So I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me, Osprey? Or?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you.
It would be good if you talk a little louder.
Sure, thank you. So one of the things is that, you know, what has become even clearer through COP27, but that all of us here know, is that the substantive work on gender and climate justice and ecological justice and economic justice that we're all part of takes place everywhere around the world, and we don't stop that work during COP27. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And I wanted to kind of maybe highlight that one of the things that technology has allowed us to do is I'm on about 10 different WhatsApp and Viber groups with various delegations and various sets of technical people and civil society groups, youth-led groups and women-led groups. And I think it's important to talk about that one of the things that we're trying to do much more effectively with every COP is to work out how we can make sure that we're still able to be in relationship and talk deeply to those who are in the middle of the negotiations. Because one of the worst parts of being in these negotiations, as we know, is when you're feeling isolated. And in COP27, that has been, the feeling of very deep anger and frustration that those of us from small island states have been feeling. It's very important for us to be in contact with each other and with social movements, including the Women and Gender constituency and many others. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is about blockage and the fact that, we are working in a range of situations, and the kinds of nuanced sets of work that go on by people in majority South and majority and minority North, and the ways that we have to negotiate with each other. It's important to name those. So there is the work that you have to do with those who kind of willfully block sets of work, who prevent change. But then there's also the problems of people who are ignoring certain parts of the text, those who turn on the silence whenever there is something that, that they don't want to look at. Then there's those who've given up, frankly, and who come, wearing a delegation badge, but really you can see them not doing much toward the contribution of something like a COP. And it's important to talk about that. And then there are, just those who are stopping the Gender Action Plan and stopping many other forms of work just because they're not engaging at all. Because, to be honest, if the Gender Action Plan really worked for women like me and women like you all who are here in this room and those who will see this online, it would be substantively tackling every single time we come to COP. It would tackle issues of gender-based violence. In the Pacific, we have double the global average. So you can't do the work on climate justice without tackling that. It would be about the unpaid care, domestic and communal work that we do every day of our lives. That's 3 to 5 times the work that men do. The ILO says that 76% of unpaid care work is done by women around the world. So climate justice work has to be about that as well. The absolute exhaustion of women around the world, and how, because of the structural problems that we're facing right now on every type of sphere, that we've got to think about care and health and well-being of women. At a time when we're seeing austerity measures put in place around the world, heightened debt around the world, and lack of vaccines. We have so many more health problems, vector and non-vector borne diseases for children and young people and women at the moment, and the elderly. So while we're dealing with all of those, we're here at COP trying to work out how we're going to deal with structural crises, and work out how we still carry on with our urgent action and mutual aid at a time when we're still seeing ridiculously the pushback against the language of loss and damage. So what we have to do is concentrate, keep building those movements with all of us and diverse genders, and as we just heard, in terms of intersectionality, but also in terms of interlinkage, making sure that those of us who are working specifically on issues like, when we're a fisherwoman, or we're a young woman builder somewhere, or there's many, many other sets of action, biodiversity protection. In my networks, there are women working on thousands of different kinds of solutions every day, and we need to stay connected on those. And I really like the WGC text, which says, the adoption of a text this year at COP27 on gender, it would have contributed so little anyway to the work of gender equality that we're all doing anyway, that we can't even claim that a decision would have made a substantive outcome to this gap. So the fact that they're kicking the can, down the road to Bonn is extremely disappointing. But to be honest, the text that was in there doesn't help women like me. And then when we look at the cover text and we see that 1.5 degrees is not even in there, when we see that the fossil fuel industry, how is it possible that we don't get that named within the cover text? They get $11 million in subsidies every single minute of every single day. And there's fossil fuel lobbyists that are everywhere right now. So we have to have that in the cover decision. Our governments, just like we are working so hard because we have pushed them. We know power doesn't move without us there pushing. So no matter what happens, we will be there doing that, just as we continue to do all these other sets of work that we do. And I want to close, thanks Osprey, by saying, you know, when you take your gaze away from the white gaze and supremacy and the transactional neoliberal funding, commodification and marketization of our work, we're already building new worlds. We're doing it together, and we're rejecting anything that isn't about substantive change, and we're putting human rights and gender justice and attention to bodies and remaking economies. We're working on water and food, soil health, on ecosystem rewilding, on mutual aid, on social flora and social protection. We're building ecosystems to test new collectivities. We're pushing everyone, we're pushing our states, we're pushing our families, our societies, because we have to build anew. It's complex, there's a lot of pushbacks and experimentation, but we're going to keep on doing this for each other, other species, and as part of the living planet. So thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noelene, for joining us. And I know that you've been very engaged, like you said, on all of the different chat channels of WhatsApp. Some of us feel like we've been living inside of our phones on WhatsApp with the negotiations, even though we're here physically. You know, there's a lot going on and communications going on. And thank you for your incredible advocacy year after year and your analysis, which we deeply appreciate. And, you know, I also wanted to say that, you know, one of the things that there's been a big discussion here is the fact that, you know, that we're here and that we will not have our voices be denied. And there has been such an oppression of our voices here, and the capacity to even be out on the streets has been completely taken away. All of the actions have been forced inside the COP, or there was, you know, threat of being arrested. And so it's been very serious that we have had to, you know, really fight to have our voices here. And people have really done an incredible job under a very difficult, oppressive situation. So that's been another condition here, and why we have to keep combining human rights with our rights to care for our communities, the forests, the rivers, the ecosystems, that we are all connected. We cannot separate out human rights from environmental rights. And that's really something that's been a big demand here. And with that, we have been saying over and over, not yet defeated, and we will never be defeated. Not yet defeated, we will never be defeated. It's something we've been saying throughout the last 2 weeks. I would now like to thank you, Noelene, again, and bring on Leila Saza Lopez, who is a dear friend and the executive director of Amazon Watch, and she's also with Patricia Gualinga, and she's been here working all week. Leila, you have the floor.
Thank you, Osprey. Hi, from our hotel rooms. I first want to just say hello to everyone. Hello to my colleagues at Amazon Watch. I see some of you there, and hello to my mom and my husband who are there. I did a little bit of outreach because I haven't been able to talk to them. I mean, it's been so hard to get on Wi-Fi. We're going to keep saying that because, you know, it's whenever we can get Wi-Fi, we send a few messages and then we have to run off to the next thing, the next event, the next side event, support our colleagues at events, at press conferences, at actions, wherever we can connect. So just want to say hello to everyone from Egypt. And I want to say thank you to the Egyptian people also, who have been so generous and have been so beautiful to all of us. Shakram, shakram, shakram to the Egyptian people. I think that before coming here, there was a lot of, I think we were all kind of tense. We had to listen to security briefings, you know, about what we could do and what we could not do here. And as a few days in, we realized that the people here of Egypt are just so wonderful. And I just have to thank them, thank the people of Egypt, because they've been so beautiful and so wonderful to all of us. And so happy that we're here. You know, I don't think any of us wanted to travel the world to be in a resort town, although it is beautiful. It is very beautiful. But we didn't really know what to expect here. And I really want to thank you, Osprey, for giving that summary at the beginning of the delegations here. And, you know, because I think we didn't really know how many people were going to be here from civil society or the Indigenous people or Black, Indigenous, people of color or women and youth. And civil society was here. That's one thing I wanted to start off by saying. They really tried to scare us into not coming. And it was a lot of effort to get here. But we're here. And we've been working day and night and very hard to get our messages across. And for us at Amazon Watch, we were here, I was here with colleagues and partners from across the Amazon to amplify the Amazon rainforest, to amplify the critical importance of the Amazon and the critical importance of Indigenous peoples as the best protectors of the Amazon, because the Amazon is at a tipping point. We started the very first day with a press conference about the tipping point and a report we recently released called Amazonia Against the Clock. And this report is the latest documentation of the state of the Amazon. And it's dire. 26% of the Amazon is at the tipping point. But it also shows where the deforestation has taken place, particularly Brazil and Bolivia, and where we can restore. And I have to say, although it's been hard, my hope has been restored here at COP. And my hope has been restored because just a few weeks ago, the Brazilian people elected a new president that just arrived the day before yesterday, like a rock star. And all the headlines of the news say Lula arrived and was welcomed like a rock star, because he represents the hope that we still have to protect the Amazon. And it's so critical that we protect the Amazon to protect and defend our climate. And Lula gave a speech yesterday where he announced that he's going to do everything to crack down on the illegal activity, on the land grabbing, on the attacks against forest defenders and Indigenous peoples and women and all who defend human rights and all who defend the Amazon and all the biomes. And this is what our Indigenous brothers and sisters from the Amazon and from all across Brazil have been saying, that when we think about the Amazon and we work to protect the Amazon, we're also working to protect the Cerrado, the tropical savanna. We are also working to protect the Pantanal, the world's largest wetland, the world's largest savanna, and the world's largest rainforest, tropical rainforest, all in Brazil. And it's so critical what this new president-elect is saying and what he's going to do, and we're going to hold him to it for our planet. And one of the very hopeful things that Lula said yesterday is that he is also establishing a minister of Indigenous peoples to basically respond to the urgency that Indigenous people's rights and territories need to be elevated at the minister and the cabinet level in Brazil. This is hope for us. The other thing that is hope for us are the youth. The youth came in full force, and I feel like a proud auntie tonight because a little girl that I met in 2004 named Elena Gualinga spoke at the closing session of the COP, the closing session of the high-level closing session of the COP today. Elena Gualinga, who's a youth, climate justice, indigenous rights ambassador. I want to say more than an activist. She's an ambassador for the Amazon and for indigenous peoples and for climate justice and for women. She's from Sarayaku, and she's our messenger. And I'm just so proud of her. And not just she represents the youth, so many of the young people that are out there fighting for climate justice for all of us. And I could say so much more, but I want to give time to Patricia, and I can translate for her. But I just want to say thank you. And we will continue, even if we have to go to Dubai next year, which we don't want to. I want to just also say that, it's not easy to come to these spaces and know that you're outnumbered, very outnumbered, but that we have to be here to speak for our Mother Earth, for our human rights, for our women's rights, for indigenous rights, and for nature's rights. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Leila. And it's been such an honor to be here with you and advocate with you. And I'll speak a little bit more about the Amazon in a moment, but let's bring Patty on, and then I'll make some comments also about what's happening with the Amazon and some of the delegates that we brought here that you mentioned. Patricia, welcome. Buenas noches.
Hola, Osprey. Buenas noches.
Puedes intervenir,
You
no
have the
quede-
floor. Patricia Gualinga is a Kichwa leader from Sarayaku, and she is the spokeswoman for Mujeres Amazónicas from Ecuador, and we're honored to have you here. Please go ahead.
Gracias, Osprey. Ya no estamos en la sede de la COP, pero para nosotros es importante compartir la experiencia que hemos pasado estos días tratando de hacer escuchar nuestra voz, nuestros problemas y tratando de tener una presencia, muy a pesar de que lo hicieron tan lejos como queriendo que nosotros no participemos.
Well, we're not right there in the COP space anymore. I think it's important that we take this time to reflect about this experience, about this time at the COP, because they did try to limit the civil society participation, and whether it was limited, we were able to intervene in many spaces.
Hemos estado diciéndoles que si no toman en cuenta la visión de los pueblos indígenas, que si no incorporan dentro de su proceso las voces de los pueblos indígenas y las propuestas que tenemos, estas COP seguirán siendo un fracaso.
And what we have been saying this whole time is that if they do not listen to our voices, indigenous peoples, if they do not listen to our proposals, then these COPs will continue to be a disaster.
Aunque hemos visto delegaciones de las empresas y de las industrias extractivas que han venido fuertemente a la COP, también hemos visto que ha habido una gran presencia de los pueblos indígenas.
And although, yes, we have seen many delegations of the companies of the fossil fuel industries, but we have also seen very strong delegations of civil society, in particular of indigenous peoples.
En particular, se ha visto también presencia de los jóvenes. Muchos jóvenes en esta COP hablando, interviniendo, diciendo desde su sentimiento lo que esperan de esta COP y denunciando también las decisiones que no están tomando. La presencia de los jóvenes, las mujeres, los pueblos indígenas ha sido muy importante.
And we've also seen a very strong presence of the youth. They have been speaking out. They have been speaking out very strongly. They've been putting out proposals, and they've also been rejecting and denouncing what they don't agree with. They've been speaking out strongly, and we've seen really strong presence of the youth, of women, of indigenous peoples.
Aún así vamos preocupados porque esperábamos más. Esperábamos que las decisiones que toman sean decisiones de avanzada y no estén tan estancados, porque estamos conscientes que no queda mucho tiempo, pero los gobiernos continúan en tratar de tener trabas y las empresas también, y no están tomando las decisiones fuertes que esperábamos que tomen. Y nuestra presencia se debe acá para tratar de presionar con nuestra presencia, nuestras voces.
But we are concerned, we are worried about the progress or lack of progress that has been made at this COP. It's as if, the governments are stuck and they continue to be stuck, even though they know that we don't have a lot of time. We see that it's like the governments and the corporations, they're stuck in a certain way. And so that's why we're here. We're here to try to put our pressure on so that for change.
Podría decir también que en esta COP también conocimos otra gente que está luchando igual que nosotros, que tiene los mismos problemas, pero que nos conecta una cuestión común, la búsqueda de soluciones y no permitir que sigan extrayendo petróleo en la Amazonía o otros recursos no renovables en otras partes del mundo. Entonces hemos encontrado gente con la que nos hemos logrado conectarnos para poder estar en unidad y continuar en este proceso.
One thing that has been positive is that we've met many people. We've connected with many people who maybe come from different parts of the world, but we have come together with common solutions and proposals. We don't want extraction in the Amazon. We don't want the continued extraction of other minerals either, of other non-renewable resources that also impact us.
Y nosotras, como de Sarayaku, hemos logrado también hablar sobre la propuesta de nuestro pueblo, la selva viviente, lo hemos compartido en varios foros y eventos. Y como tía, también me he sentido orgullosa de la nueva generación, jóvenes de Sarayaku, sobrinas mías, que están hablando muy fuertemente desde la visión de los jóvenes. Nina y Elena han estado muy activas en esta COP y yo ya veo que la nueva generación está asumiendo con mucha responsabilidad.
And on behalf of Sarayaku, we have been speaking out and we have been sharing our proposal, the Kausaksacha, the Living Forest proposal, which is a proposal that comes from our people. And as an auntie, I feel very proud as well. I feel very proud that my nieces, Nina and Elena Gualinga, have been out and they've been very busy. They've been working very hard, speaking out and speaking for our peoples, and they represent the new generation. So it makes me very proud.
Y bueno, vamos a continuar. Continuamos con esto hasta que escuchen. Y si no escuchan, también vamos a estar ahí hasta que, por lo menos para molestarles y decirles a nuestros territorios, no les vamos a dejar ingresar para que extraigan recursos y generen más muerte. Y ahí estamos, en camino. Muchísimas gracias, Osprey, y a los que están escuchando.
And we will continue. We will never give up. We will continue until they listen. And if they don't listen, then at least we'll be there to bother them and cause them some trouble, because we will never give up. And so we really thank you, Osprey, for this space.
Muchas gracias. Thank you both so much for taking time with us this evening after a very, very busy week. And I really want to thank, Amazon Watch for the incredible leadership you have around ensuring that the Amazon is represented here and Indigenous peoples. Leila and I have worked together for years. I'm very thrilled that Patricia Gualinga was able to speak we had a special press conference of Indigenous women from the Amazon and their calls to action. And Patricia spoke so fiercely and powerfully, talking about the Sarayaku people being the people of the zenith and the prophecy that has come from the Sarayaku people about their leadership at this time. And with Patricia Gualinga here and Helena and Nina Gualinga, we have these strong women from Sarayaku really presenting a different vision of the future through the Living Forest proposal. And that energy has been brought here because of all of you. We've been very honored to have Elena on our delegation. I also want to bring forward at the Amazon call to action press conference, which everyone can see. We posted it online. We had Sonia Guajajara, just to mention that and tie that back into what Leila was talking about, which is this new election of Lulu in Brazil, and the incredible hope that that brings us for the Amazon rainforest, but for indigenous peoples. And the excitement that we also have about Sonia Guajajara, because one of the things that she told me last year was, with all the work the indigenous women are doing in Brazil, they had made the decision that they would run for office and begin to take over the government. And it's incredible. It gives me goosebumps and chills, because Sonia just also won as a congressional member in Brazil. And there's another woman as well who won. So we have these indigenous women leaders now in the government itself, along with Lulu. So it's really exciting to see what's going to happen in Brazil after this horrible Bolsonaro regime. What will happen with indigenous rights? What will happen with the protection of indigenous lands in the Amazon rainforest, which is important to all of us. So between the incredible delegates from Sarayaku, Sonia Guajajara, which we were really honored to have on our delegation, and the incredible leadership also from, I don't want to forget, also Tylee Terena from the Pantanal. And as Leila mentioned, how important that is ecologically to the Amazon as well, who's our WECAN coordinator in Brazil, a youth voice. As Leila was mentioning, these incredible youth coming up, and Patricia mentioning the youth coming up, these incredible indigenous leaders from the Amazon who spoke out and are continuing to speak out here. We're not done yet. It's been very exciting and so critical to have these indigenous women leaders from across the Amazonian region. We thank you so much, and it was just such an honor to be with you, Leila, an honor to be with you, Patricia. Thank you for being with us tonight. And let's have the Amazon turn around.
Can I just say one more thing? I just looked at my notes, and I really wanted to say, because we did have a press conference also about financing and divestment, and us as women and our work to go after these corporations and influence their investments. And, all this talk about loss and damage, it's kind of cop speak for how are you going to pay for your mess? These countries who are, many of us come from the United States or the global north. We've been the primary, or our countries and the companies from our countries have been the primary polluters. And yes, when people ask, who's going to pay for all this climate destruction? Who's going to pay for the transition? Yeah, the ones who have made the most damage should pay. And it's not just governments. It needs to be those companies as well. Because these, as Osprey was saying, these companies are continuing to extract, and they're continuing to invest in destruction. And what we're saying is, no, you cannot continue to invest in this destruction. You need to invest in the protection. You need to invest in life. Invest in protecting the Amazon, invest in protecting our communities and our planet, not destroying it. And if you continue to do that, we're going to go after you. And as Patricia says, even if you don't listen to us, we're going to just be a thorn in your side. But we're going to just keep on going because, we have to.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that comment, Leila. And it's another thing, and I know that we have Ashley Godardo from WECAN on the line posting these things, and we'll make sure to post the press conference that you just mentioned. It was a press conference we put on about women leading divestment, both in fossil fuel extraction and also deforestation. And so you can look at that press conference that Leila is referring to, where we presented different reports and why we need to go and directly deal with the financiers of deforestation, the financiers of fossil fuel extraction. And we had a very powerful a press conference about that. It also included the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and how we get governments to also stop extracting. And so it's about going after the governments and corporations who often work hand in hand. So yes, thank you so much for bringing that forward. And we thank you both so much for joining us and continuing on with the fight. And now I'm going to ask, speaking of youth, we have Mitzi Jonelle Tan with us. She is a convener and international spokesperson, youth advocates for climate action from the Philippines. And Mitzi, we'd love to have you go ahead and take the floor now. Thank you so much for joining us, Mitzi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As the previous speaker already mentioned, we're seeing how the current discussions about the COP text is a betrayal to young people, to indigenous peoples, to marginalized communities, to the people in the global south, the people of color, to humanity, because comparing it to last year's Glasgow COP text, it's gotten even more watered down. It has gotten even more loopholes in it. We're still not seeing a mention of all fossil fuels. We're still seeing that global north countries aren't paying up for the loss and damages and reparations that we so desperately need. And it's a betrayal. There's no other word to say it. We only have a few days left and we cannot stop pushing. We have to make sure that the fossil fuels, all fossil fuels are mentioned, phased out or phased down, and not having these keywords like unabated and insufficient subsidies and all these loopholes, really, to make sure that they can keep profiting off of our destruction. We have to be very clear, and as Osprey already mentioned it, we need something like the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, because it is our generation's weapon of mass destruction. It is killing us. It is killing our planet. It is killing our people. And we have to be very clear. And you can see that global north countries especially are investing so much into fossil fuels, which means they have the money to invest in renewable and to finance loss and damage. There are no more excuses. Young people are very clear about this. We need that loss and damage finance facility. We need to make sure that climate finance is in the form of grants and not loans, new and not reallocated. And we need a fossil fuel phase out. And if we don't do that, then what are we doing at this COP? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitzi, for joining us. And Mitzi's been here speaking out. She spoke at there was a huge action midweek where everyone marched through the entire venue. And we ended up in this one space that was almost like a stadium of just everyone chanting and powerful speeches. And Mitzi gave some very powerful remarks here. And I just really wanted to acknowledge you and your presence here and all that you've given. And thank you so much for all the energy you've put out this week. Thank you. And now I would like to bring Adriana Calderon. She's a youth climate activist from the US and Mexico, an advocate with Fridays for Future, and bring you on to have the floor.
Hi everyone,
with
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I've been losing my connection. It's been really unstable here in Egypt. As well, I'm doing school, so it's been also hard to keep up with that. So, well, I'm not here to talk about school, but more about what we have been doing as youth. As Mitzi, I'm part of Fridays for Future, and we've been supporting actions of different collectives. We've been demanding loss and damage. We've been demanding for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. We've been organizing our own mobilizations. Last Friday, we still got one tomorrow. So if you want to join us, feel free. It's at 2:30 p.m. And we expect to have more people and youth convene again to demand the demands of the youth. What's surprising more about this COP is that countries still talk about fossil fuels, invest some of them. That's why we are demanding the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. There's not a clear path of a just transition. There's nothing mentioned about them, not even a single word. My country, Mexico, just increased, like as we are here in COP, they increased the budget of one of the most polluting companies of the world, the Mexican Petroleum Company, while making the promises of reducing the emissions. It doesn't make sense that they are increasing and augmenting the budget of like these facilities. The fossil fuel industry still occupy one of the biggest delegations of the whole COP. As we heard from Global Witness, 636 representatives of oil companies occupy chairs and seats that young people and women, indigenous leaders could have occupied. And while negotiators keep going on, blah, 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 human rights violations keep happening in Egypt, in my country, all around the world. Well, 60,000 political prisoners. Egypt still a mandate with human rights violations, and that's what we are demanding at youth. All political prisoners need to be liberated. We can strike here, yes, but this is such a small space. Tomorrow we will strike at the COP venue, but what will happen when we leave? Where are they? What is going to happen to the activists that we leave behind? This small space is not enough to protest and demand what we actually want to demand, not only as young people and women. To come over, there have been no clear resolutions or proposal on loss and damage till today, and while it's still on the agenda, there's still 2 days to go. There's nothing clear that it's going to happen. There's not a path set. We need to help most countries most affected by the climate crisis. Countries like the G7, the G20, who are meeting right now, still deflate and deny to pay climate finance and reparations to the countries. They refuse to pay the climate debt, the historical debt they have. In gender, there's still no consideration of gender diverse people in any agenda of climate diverse and everything that has been negotiating. Only 7 women out of a group of 110 politicians were present at the Leaders Summit, and only 34% of the negotiations at COP are women. How do we expect that they speak for us, that they speak what we want, and that they share our demands when it's not even 50% of them? How can we ensure strong gender policies when we are not even at the table? 80% of the people who are most affected and displaced by climate change are women, and we still see this lack of participation. It's nothing about us without us, and women are not in the conversation. In terms of not being in conversation, we also see this with young people. We have a young pavilion, but that's thanks to the civil and the society who's working hard of the young people standing at night, waking up at 2 a.m. to go to meetings. The spaces are still limited. National delegations still not include us. Climate policy still not include us. Children are still missing on the conversation. We are not just a box to tick when they want us to be there and when they want us to speak and just to do an interview. As the battle is about our present and our future, unfortunately, this won't be the last COP where we will still be there demanding. We will see each other again, unfortunately, in Dubai. And we wanted this to be the last COP where young people were there and spoke there. It's our present, it's our future. We will keep fighting, demanding, and resisting. In terms of more going on in my country, the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador is still presumes that we have green plans and green initiatives, that we will finally reach a goal by 2030, which is too long into distance for what we actually need. There are no news on climate migrants. There is no reaffirmation of that the US will finally support them. And then instead of having climate migration facilities that we need, we get a whole green energy facility being built in the north of Mexico that will displace more people. Mexico, according to Global Witness, is the most dangerous country to be an activist. Still, there were no conversations about the 220 activists disappeared. There were no conversations about what's going to happen to them. There was no accountability made to countries who are most affected and who are suffering the consequences of the climate crisis. Fake promises and the lack of true representation talk more about the actual success of COP that I can say. But we're still here, we're still fighting, and the youth will come in again tomorrow at 2:30 to demand for loss and damages and a clear path on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your incredible work and the you've just shared. We really appreciate Adriana. And again, our youth are brilliant. I would love to hand all of these negotiations over to our youth. They know what they need. They know the direction we're going. And you can hear it in their comments and every time they're speaking. Thank you so much, Adriana, for your words and all of your effort here this week. We really appreciate it. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Carmen Capriles. She's the founder of Reacción, Climática, and she's also the WECAN coordinator for Bolivia and Latin America. Welcome, Carmen. I don't know if you can turn your video on. If you can, please join us. We don't hear you.
Hello,
There you are.
Spray. Yes, I'm in the Climate Justice Hub. And yeah, I want to show you the patchwork that we have here, which is amazing. Because they're from the campaigns that they're doing in Africa. So they're pretty nice. And finally, we have this space, which is the Climate Hub, that is for all the people that's not inside COP, but also that need some space to get away from COP. Because as you know, I have been going to COP often. And yeah, I ask myself, why do I keep doing this? And actually it's because COP is the place where I feel the most uncomfortable. I really need to feel that discomfort in order to have the energy and the input to do things. So that's why when I go back home, I have like the energy to change things. I know that I cannot change the things at COP, but I know that I can do small things back home. So that's kind of like my approach within COPs. Nevertheless, I think that we start talking about loss and damage, for example, 2014. And now it's been almost 9 years. And finally, we have at least money that's been talking the table for loss and damage, something that we thought we were never going to see. There are many buts in that, but yeah, multilateralism is complex. And COP, unfortunately, is not going to solve climate change. And it's not going to solve climate change, not because multilateralism doesn't work, but because most of the governments around the world are not good. So unfortunately, we cannot expect nothing from them because we are seeing what's going on at country level, especially in developing countries, how governments are helping companies, how governments are giving away the resources in order to have a high class that is getting all the income, and then the rest of the population that has to work in forced conditions into minery or any of the other extractive industries. And it's sad because we hope we really need to change that system to be able to change this reality. And that can only be done with awareness and with education. People that know what's going on, what's happening, and education to know what alternatives we have, how we can build up better. We have hidden 8 billion persons this week, which is a huge number of the human population. And it is a sign that if we keep on doing what we're doing, what future are we letting all this youth that are right now being born? So we really need a lot of reflection. We need of action, any action that we can do. Also push governments. We need political will to implement solutions for climate change, for adaptation, for loss and damage. But we need to start fighting in all the fronts possible. So I am one of the optimists that still thinks that change is possible, and we'll see what happens. Thank you, Osprey, and greetings to all of you girls. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. We're just really honored to be here. And just to mention also that while we've been here, Carmen and I and others have been meeting about the Escalating agreement, which Patricia Gualinga also is on the steering committee of, with the WECAN steering committee on the Escalating agreement, which is a agreement that comes from the Latin American Caribbean region, which is very specific in that it applies to both human rights and environmental rights. And it's really the only legally binding agreement that we see that recognizes that there's a need to protect land defenders as well as the environment. And so we're very excited about the fact that the Escalating agreement has now been ratified and that there is going to be forward motion of implementation of the Escalating agreement. Of course, we're going to have to push governments to implement. We're going to have to do a lot of education around the Escalating agreement, but we think this is also important to how we can shift action on protecting communities, protecting forests, because we have actually a legally binding agreement that is there to also protect women land defenders, which is key to resolving the climate crisis, is making sure that people have the right to stand up for the forest, the right to stand up for the environment, to not be criminalized for their activities to protect the land and the global climate. So I'm very excited, Carmen, that we had that opportunity to have that conversation and to continue moving forward on that important agreement that is coming out of the Latin America and Caribbean region. And I will now like to hand the floor over to Geraldine Encina. She's Indigenous and Relations Advisor, One Earth member of Grand Council of the Eagle and the Condor, and member of the Earth Timekeepers from Turtle Island or the US. Geraldine, you have the floor. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be among you all. I was able to be in the first week with Chie Bastida, my daughter, my dear daughter, and also my husband, Mindahi Bastida, was with another delegation of Wisdom Keepers of the Eagle and Condor. So I, especially greet Patricia, who's there watching. Hi, hola, Patricia, and Leila, and so many others, Mitzi as well. And saludos a todas. So yeah, I would like to just share how proud I am of all the young people who were so vividly present with so much energy at the Youth Pavilion for Children and Youth, which was at last opened and set up for the youth. And this is COP27 happening. And hopefully this is also replicated in other COPs like the upcoming or future COPs on biodiversity. This space enabled for young people to express and present all their incredible work throughout their regions and really provide insights about how they're being able to protect their territories, sometimes with new tools, sometimes in combination with their new access to technology and knowledge. But what was also very reaffirming is how they're keeping to principles about being true to Mother Earth. They are very firm in translating that connection with Mother Earth in all their different opportunities at panels. So much that my daughter happened to be sitting next to someone from the Rockefeller Foundation, and he was humble enough to say at the end that he had to accept that he had not made the principle of connection with Mother Earth, in a principle within the framework when supporting projects. So he would be much more committed to ensuring that connectedness to nature was a top criteria when submitting funds to different initiatives. So I can see that youth are coming in as voices of Mother Earth, very fiercely, very firmly. They are ready to speak up And some youth were telling me that they were feeling that they had more opportunity to express their messages and demands in this space of Sharum than back at home, which is very sad. Where I'm talking about youth from Ecuador, youth from different countries in Latin America that are getting death threats, and that are not able to feel safe back in their own territories. So this is something that is not being spoken, but it gives me hope to see, Sonia Guajajara, also Francia Marquez. She's such a warrior, and Francia was, at a panel with Elena and Chie and Shivi, and also Aisha, Sidika, and what a force to see them together, being featured as Francia Marquez, like, different versions of these warrior women. So to have been able to interact with these warrior women who have a very clear understanding of how they want to stand for the rights of Mother Earth, for human rights, for the rights of defenders, and ensure that every policy is going to be in favor of indigenous peoples and African American and peoples and all marginalized peoples was really really powerful, and it just ensures that young people are having fantastic mentors, so much that these young girls are actually considering going and visiting and spending time with these warrior women to get more of that mentoring and training in a way. So I'll leave it as that, talking as a mother mostly of this young generation, and really proud and hopeful that starting at home with very firm agendas supported by the elders will set a new route and a new like a new route for the next decades. So yes, we'll probably have to go back and continue attending these COPs, and it's the only way to ensure that indigenous peoples get the acknowledgement about their contribution to all that's being discussed, which is ensuring that our planet can keep its resilience as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, for your work here and being such a great mama to Jie, who is bringing her message around the world, and for you for the incredible leadership and mentorship that you are providing. Thank you so much for joining us and all the effort and work that you have put out to be at this COP. I wanted to also mention, because people are talking about nature and Mother Earth in these spaces, how powerful it is. You could actually feel the room lighten up when we are in these spaces where pretty much the negotiations are about trade deals, carbon offsets, who's going to make money from resolving the climate crisis, which is impossible if you keep extracting, and that this is their methodology is through carbon offsets. And I was at one event where they were talking about how much money could be made from what's underneath the ground in Africa as a solution, because we'll be able to extract so much to now then be able to have materials for renewable energy. We have to remember that even though we're promoting renewable energy, we have to be very careful. It's not just about substituting fossil fuels for renewable energy, and then we're extracting more from indigenous lands and areas that need to be protected. It's about changing who we are and how we're living with each other, and living with a much smaller footprint. It's a much bigger dialogue around degrowth and different economies that are not extractive economies, care economies, circular economies. So what we're doing here is also creating a very different vision for the future, because the politics we have right now, are not able to cope with the climate crisis. We don't have the politics in place. And so part of what you're hearing from all the women who've spoken tonight on this very wild guerrilla live stream here is that we're here presenting our vision. We're presenting a vision of Indigenous peoples, a vision of women's leadership, of gender diverse leadership, of feminist economies, of rights of nature. We did a beautiful press conference on the rights of nature with Casey Camp Hornick from the Ponca Nation. And we delivered a report that Movement Rights and WECAN and the Global Alliance for Rights of Nature, presenting a very different view of Earth jurisprudence, where we see that that nature has a right, just like human rights, and that we need to live within the natural laws of Mother Earth. And so we presented rights of nature here, and how we need to have completely different DNA in our governance and legal frameworks that really recognize the rights of nature. And to mention that Ecuador, especially with Indigenous leaders, were able to bring rights of nature into their constitution in 2008. And now countries and communities around the world are really seeing rights of nature as a solution, because again, the politics that exist now cannot respond with their neoliberal economic frameworks and patriarchal and colonialist ideas. How can they possibly change the system that is based upon these systems of oppression? We have to change all of that. We need to decolonize. We need to have very different systems that recognize all diverse genders, and a social and economic framework that is really coming from a climate justice foundation. And so a lot of this is about disrupting this space and bringing forward a very different vision of our future. I also wanted to say that we've made it very clear that we will not have sacrificed people, we will not have sacrificed zones, and we will not have sacrificed countries. That's a big thing that the people are pushing forward here, that these solutions can't have whole countries and the global south be sacrificed for how this is going to go forward with these net zero programs and these carbon offset programs. We're saying no to sacrifice people, no to sacrifice land. No, we need to have climate justice, and we need it now. And there's no going forward without that. And I also want to thank the Egyptian people, as Leila stated, for welcoming us. They have been so beautiful with us and sharing their culture, their music, the Bedouin people here. There's been incredible a welcoming that has been here. There has also been difficulty. There has also been a lot of racism expressed. It's been very mixed, but I will say there has been a lot of hospitality as well from the people of the land and the deserts here, and all of us experiencing the desert winds and a beautiful Red Sea that is very soft and gentle. We went with some of the elders down to the water, and the sand is the color of a lavender and rose. I mean, it's just, the land here also needs to be acknowledged as an ancient land that is also trying to speak through all of us, that wants to live, that wants to live and speak through us. And I want to acknowledge that. And I would like to close this evening by dedicating this space to people we have lost this year. Many of us have lost elders. Many have, not made it through the pandemic. And particularly, many of us from North America and Turtle Island have lost Joy Braun. I wanted to bring her forward. She passed away during the COP, a tremendous leader from Turtle Island, part of the Indigenous Environmental Network. We had a ceremony here in which We really honored her. And I just wanted to also dedicate this evening to Joy Braun and others who we have lost in these battles, as well as the political prisoners who are in jail, who have had their voices silenced, and just to uplift a lot of the losses as well as a lot of the victories that we've experienced here. We have 2 more days of the COP. The negotiations will certainly go into Saturday, but we wanted to take this time for a quick report out, and we're so thankful that people could join us. Some speakers were not able to, they couldn't get on the internet. It's been very difficult for us to have communications here. I thank all of you who have joined us. There's lots more to say. We will be reporting out with a blog. I know a lot of the organizations here will be also sharing their analysis as we close out over the next few weeks. And we will continue to fight. We are not defeated. We are not defeated. We are not defeated. We are not defeated. We are standing and we are fighting together. And all of us collectively as a women's circle are providing a huge foundation for our vision going forward. And I send my love and care and community to all of you as we continue our struggle and our solutions, and know that we will never give up on the beauty of Mother Earth and the beauty of our love for each other and the beauty of future generations. So thank you, everyone. And we appreciate you joining us from all over the world. And we will continue on with this conversation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Night. Thank you.